6 o'clock. This is Saad here in the studio in London, and hopefully I have got uh, Gregory. Are you there?
Hello.
Oh, welcome to the show, Gregory. And please tell us where you are and how's the weather where you are.
It is cool here in Brussels.
Okay, and Mena, are you here online as well? Can you hear me, Mena? Oh, okay, actually, maybe he's not online yet. We'll have to get him in a minute. I'm Saad here in the studio, listeners, and in London, and it has just stopped raining now, but it was started raining about an hour or so ago. It's just overcast at the moment, but it's been nice and warm today. Yes, so I'm gonna hopefully I will get our man up online soon. In the meantime, listeners, I want to tell you what the show is all about. I told you it's a spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdrushin. And we have a new topic every week. The topic tonight is harvest. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here is in UK 079 444 313 You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 004479 313 Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. I'm going to just try and get our man Mena online. Just see if I can find him here. Okay, we're just going to call him now. So again, listeners, just to remind you, the topic for tonight is harvest. And basically, this is the time of harvest, at least in the northern hemisphere. And many people celebrate it, and we thought it was suitable for discussion tonight. We seem to be struggling to have Mena online. We'll still keep trying. So in the meantime, I'm going to read you what is the Grail message. The Grail message, in the light of truth, by Abdrushin, is the spiritual knowledge of life. It offers an explanation of the world, a picture of creation on the basis of natural laws. Its lectures contain valuable basic elements as a help in life. For through the knowledge mediated, the reader is again brought closer to life and led back to God. The Grail message deals with important fundamental questions of life by explaining in a clear and logical way the automatic working of the laws of nature, the whole weaving of creation, allowing every process to be recognized, and thereby the purpose of our whole life. It is directed at the individual and speaks to the innate experiences of the human being, their strengths and weaknesses. Thus, every reader has the opportunity to discover through the intuitive perception if what is stated is the truth. Combining with matter-of-fact reasoning, a complete world picture arises, where there is no separation between the visible world and the great world beyond the five senses, nor any separation between scientific and religious striving for knowledge. I'd like to give you a couple of quotes from the author of the Grail message, Abdrushin. The hearer and reader of my lectures should always work within himself, keenly probing and building bridges from one lecture to the other, as well as out into the great and small world happenings. Only then will he be able to understand the Grail message and find that it gradually shapes itself into one complete whole, without leaving any gaps. Again and again in all the happenings, the reader will come back to the basic features. He can explain everything without having to change even one single sentence. The word of the Grail message lives, so that it permits only those people who really carry the honest desire in their souls to find abundantly. All else is automatically rejected by it. For the arrogant and those who seek superficially, the message will remain the book with seven seals. And I'd like to give you one more quote from the author. I wish to fill the gaps which have so far always remained unanswered in the souls of men, and which never leave any serious thinker in peace, if he earnestly seeks for the truth. So, dear listeners, just to remind you again, the topic for tonight is harvest. And if you want to join us with any questions or comments, the number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 313 66. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. I'm just going to try and connect with Mena again one more time, and if we don't get him, we'll continue and hopefully catch him a bit later. So let me just.
I'm here.
Oh, you're here. Welcome, Mena. How are you,
Yes.
and how's the weather where you are?
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, not too bad.
Okay, very good.
It's
Welcome.
just-
I don't know what was going on. We were calling you, but you're back now,
Oh.
so I'm glad you're with us. Thank you. Right. Just want to remind the listeners the topic again is harvest, and this is in the northern hemisphere. As people are, or the farmers at least, are now harvesting their crop. So I want to start with you, Gregory, about harvest. When we think of harvest, obviously, first thing we think of is nature. But with the topic for tonight, are we going to just think about the nature's harvest, or is there more to than that?
Thanks for that question. Harvest remain harvest, whether it be nature or otherwise. The meaning of harvest is a gathering of, if one is talking about nature or about farms, it's a gathering of crops. But generally, harvest must be seen as a gathering of substances that have matured due to they have to return to their origin. The beginning or the end is joining the beginning. So that's a rough picture once you have of harvest.
Thank you for that. I just want to let you know there may be an issue with the website, the blessradio.org website. I'm not sure it's broadcasting. There's a sort of error message showing, but we're going to look at that immediately to sort that out. So we'll continue in the meantime. Thank you, Gregory, for your answer there. Mena, did you want to say anything?
Well, he's mentioned everything. I mean, he said it's the gathering of crops, but we also have a harvest of our thoughts and our deeds, other deeds, other than crops.
Yes. So that you could say is our human harvest. It's what we do, what we produce.
Yeah.
Okay. So just one moment. One second. Yeah. So like Gregory, you said about nature, producing a harvest, and I've just and men are talking about human. You could call it human harvest, or the produce of human beings. Let's
because it just says to receive the benefit or consequences of an action.
Yes.
So it could refer to so many forms of returns,
yes,
so to speak. Yeah.
So what I want to say then, Gregory, to that is it's very easy to see the harvest in nature, with, as I said, with planting crops and seeds, and then you get the fruit. Or if I say fruit, I mean in general, of course. We know there's vegetables as well. So you can see that very clearly. What you plant, you sow, and you get the crop harvesting after that. Now, with the human beings, when we sow or when we do an action or a deed, uh, is that harvest produced? Um, how does that happen? That harvest, because do we do something that brings the harvest itself, or is there some other thing involved that brings the harvest?
I'm sorry, there seemed to be confusion about harvest and confusion about nature. When thoughts are mentioned, are thoughts which spring out from the human brain. Does the human brain physically not belong to nature? So
Yes.
When we try to look at things, we should have an openness and consider harvest as a gathering of the multiples of what had been let out. That let out means sown. When maturity of those seeds or those things which have been put out, when the maturity comes, then you gather them. So it should not be tied to only what you see physically, because there are many other things, some vibrations which man cannot see with the physical eyes. So there are many things which must be considered, and the different scenarios have one thing in common: the gathering or coming together of the fruits. That means the consequences. And this only happens when these fruits or consequences have matured. With that in mind, one can see a broader picture rather than tying it to the harvest of crops, which we see almost every time. One should be open and know also that our thoughts, our physical thoughts, which goes on in our brain, which we also fling out, these also belong to nature.
Thank you for that. Why I was asking that question was because on the earth we have the human justice in quotes, human laws, and when things, let's say, unjust things or happen, then people say, okay, either the police or you say take someone to court to get justice. So that is like a human justice, not really connected with nature, and so why I ask that nature, obviously we human beings are involved as well in the in producing the, sowing the crops and so on. But if I just look only at the, let's say, human matters only, which is like we said, thoughts, words, and deeds, there's like, you could say there are two systems. There's nature bringing its own justice or harvest, and then there's the human system where we, let's say, if I can say, judge and give the results from, if I can, I don't want to use the word punishment because it's not really how I want to portray it, but basically we give our own justice. So I was trying to work out if the human system works, let's say, independent of the nature, and so you can get different results, obviously, what nature brings and what human beings bring. So in a way, the question is, do we have two harvests for the human beings, the nature harvest and also the human's own earthly system?
Actually, if one is to look at it very carefully, the so-called human system is fraught with errors. So talking about human system and their justice system, It's so difficult to hold it and talk about harvest in that case. For as many know very well, it is what lies behind the human activity that really counts. What's even in the, for those who do the investigation, the motives. It is the motive that now trigger the type of returns, the depth of returns back to the person that had triggered it. So when one is talking of the human system going to court and to get justice, in the court system, the first thing the police try to do is, what is the motive? And we must be honest with ourselves. How many people are there that are able to perceive the motive behind every action? Is the justice system able to perceive the motive of an action or of an activity in order to pass justice into it? The answer is no, very far from it. So you have a system which is not complete, is unable to see the whole picture. So getting justice, like you mentioned, becomes something which is incomplete. Whereas what one is talking here is harvest, which is a gathering of what had initially been put out there in creation or in nature. What you were referring to basically was that of the animistic, what you see with your physical eyes. Whereas what one is referring to is based on an eternal law, that law which is referred to as that of reciprocity, reciprocal action. As we all know, when one puts a thread into creation, that is a line of activity, it flings out and attracts many similar threads. And when it is matured enough, it comes back and precipitates the activities which the originator had intended, the real activity, that is what lay behind why he or she had put that seed into creation. That is the motive. That is the justice which one talks about. The so-called human justice system is unable to survey this, for most of its activity are intellectual, which only see part of it and base their judgment on one part of it. So it is one-sided, and one cannot call that real justice.
Thank you, Gregory, for going into it at that depth. What I can understand from what you have said is that the human justice, first of all, like you say, it is incomplete, and it really only works on a sort of very low level in terms of looking at what is physically visible, or of course we have to look at the motive, what somebody's doing, but we can't see that in every case. What is the motive? And but with the nature, justice through nature, it's a much finer, and it sort of looks more comprehensively. Your thought, your physical deed, and It's just a much finer uh, way it works, and
Yeah.
and I think also one thing you can say it's automatic rather than with the human is when somebody decides to do some action or let's say take somebody to court or whatever justice somebody tries to do, only then we get in quotes the justice from them. But with the nature it's always automatic, so you can't really compare it. As you said, it's not really justice the human way. So I think Mena, you wanted to say something.
Yes, please. Yeah, Gregory, thanks for giving us a broad, perspective of the term harvest, which which you did infer that, goes into so many areas of nature, human nature and crop life. But I don't know if you could just restrict the harvest, this one, but the one you're discussing now, to that time of the year where crops are cut and collected from the fields,
Yes.
or the activity of cutting and collecting them
Of,
at a particular time.
yes, and
That,
so Mena,
yeah,
go. No, I appreciate what you're saying, Mena, because I know I focused on the human side here, and of course it's the
mhm,
season we are in a way what this is mainly all about. So
yeah.
okay, so I guess Mena, did you have a question on that specifically?
Yeah, no, yeah, because he did talk about the time this in the northern hemisphere that people
Yeah.
are harvesting because of
Yes.
the October period.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking is we are talking about the crops that are being cut and collected from the
Yeah.
fields.
Yes, but
The,
do you have
yeah,
okay? And is there anything specific you would like to ask about that? Anything?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yes, actually, yeah. Why has this? Why is it important for us to celebrate the cutting and collecting of crops from the fields, and through this activity, what do we what does it what does nature tell us, and how do we show our appreciation for what we have? I think these are basic questions which we would like to know about.
Yes.
Well, like you have already mentioned, you were talking about the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Almost in all communities, these communities have existed because they needed nutrients from the soil and they had planted crops. And it takes some time. Some of these crops may just take 3 months, some may take 6 months, some may take years. So it's not only, in quotes, the so-called Northern Hemisphere that these harvests have been realized, but also in other communities in the Southern Hemisphere, in the so-called primitive, uncivilized. They themselves have already known that at specific periods, these crops mature. And because they now know about this, they themselves have also reflected much further, knowing fully well that the farmer who works very closely with nature or in nature is able to perceive entities, which entities also dispense. They have called these entities different names, all right, depending on the community. And having observed this or intuitively sensed this, there are also some who have seen these entities because these entities also help in the dispensation of their particular radiation, which radiation permeates these crops, which they themselves now have together. Some of the crops they did not sow by themselves, but have found it in forests and had seen what wonderful things during their experiencing. So, in appreciation for the bounty that nature has granted them, they came together to celebrate. You will find this in the so-called European or North American communities, and also in African communities. There are some communities, say in the Africans and the West African, where they say they have their new yam or whatever they call it. I'm sure the same thing we have in the Indian community, different parts of the world, whether North America or South America. So these things are not figments of imagination. It's only having been permitted to gather these crops, they sense that inner compulsion to say thank you for these gatherings which they have been able to bring in one place. Thank you in the sense that we have now tasted of the bits we're able to put in nature, and nature has rewarded us bountifully, such that another season will come so that this will continue. So it's a response to the bounty, which we now call harvest, that made these communities, come together and show deep gratitude for what has been granted them. But one should also understand that this harvest is not just a figment of imagination or appreciation, that it is an integral part of one of the laws in creation or the laws in nature, which law is referred to as that of reciprocal activity, such that a cycle is completed.
Thank you, Gregory,
Yeah.
for that. Go on, Mena, you wanted to say?
I think that's thanks for giving us that very clear picture of nature and the harvest of crops and how it is come about and how it relates to other activities which man is related to. Can we say that this harvest is just? You said it's not a figment of imagination. What more do we have to learn from harvesting itself? What do man has to recognize from the harvest that takes place in nature? Gregory, can you throw more light on that?
Well, many have now realized that whenever they sow, they will have to maintain what they have sown. They have to support it until it gets to maturity, and then there is the harvest. One has already alluded to that in the law of reciprocity. But that does not suffice. For as man has now realized that there is reciprocity, or what is referred to the law of reciprocal action, the next question one should be asking oneself, how did this come into being? Power, substance, or substantiality or elements are involved. Where did this come from? There is continuous sowing and continuous reaping. Power is involved. Where did this power originate from? What is the source? For the sake of continuity of the sowing and the reaping, whether it's been the physical crops which we see, some crops which, when planted, may take 3 months, some may take a year, some may take much more than that, could take years before it starts yielding its harvest. For the sake of continuity, power, substantiality are involved. From where did these arise? These are the further questions which every human spirit should ask themselves. For this reciprocal activity can be found not only in harvest, but also in the human being here on earth, in the so-called breathing in and breathing out, in the so-called food intake and waste elimination. So all the human spirit need to do is to look at a particular lesson they have learned from the sowing and the reaping which is called the harvest, and learn the necessary lesson and strive to apply this to other areas. It is its duty to do so. In such, or in striving along such lines, it will be led gradually in his thinking, in his intuitive perception, gradually and step by step, to move towards the source of this power that keeps these in balance. One may also refer to this law as that of balance. So it is so very many-sided, for it is the task of the human spirit or the task of the human personality to understand what lies behind it, which we also just mentioned, the motive behind harvests.
Thank you again, Gregory. Before I ask you the next thing, I just want to remind listeners, dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abrushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is harvest. And you can join in the discussion with any question or comments. The number to contact us here in UK, it is 079 444 31366. You can call, text or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside UK, it is 0044 79 444 31366. Again, you can call, text or use WhatsApp. Gregory, I just want to come back on what you've just said about, about looking at the source of the power, that is bringing this harvest. And you also mentioned there's substantiality. And I was thinking the listeners may not have heard of that term before. So could you give us, explain what that means, substantiality?
Basically, many listeners has heard of the word substance. One only extended it and called it, used it as a noun, substantiality. Substantiality has to do basically with the, in quotes, with the elements that are needed for forming. Many have heard of the word substance. It's basically the same thing. But a more precise picture can be found in the work in the light of truth. For the answers given here are given in bits in order to lead many a person towards the walk in the light of truth, such that they themselves may examine it thoroughly. For indeed, that is the purpose of these discussions.
Thank you for that. So I just want to let listeners know, if you're interested in getting a copy of the Grail message or want to get more information, you can go to this website, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that: www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And again, Gregory, continuing from what you said earlier, you, you're saying with the harvest we need to look at the source of, of the power. So, what? How do we do that? I mean, what is it that allows us to be aware of the source? Because we have said nature is bringing the harvest, and it's such a general word in a way. We don't understand really what is nature, in a sense. Would you say, is nature the source, or is there something, another source?
It is understandable that unless one has a complete picture, there is likely to be confusion when these words are mentioned. Nature, as we say it, are basically what we are able to perceive with our physical five senses. The motive, what lies behind nature, which basically is what we are able to perceive, what animates nature is what one is referring to. For we all assume or know that power animates. Power gives animation to any activity. If there is no power behind some activity, it will not proceed. It will not even be initiated. So that which animates whatever activity, be it human activity, as we know it, or activity which occurs in nature, as we know it, power remains ubiquitous. Power is always there. It is the same power that activates the earth, what one sees as a tree, what one sees as vegetation, the animals, the earth, the moon, the sun, the universe, the physical universe we see. It is the motive behind what moves it is the power that permeates. Of course, this power has always been there. So one cannot separate nature from the power. An attempt to do that means nature will collapse, will disintegrate. But nature, as we know it, has always been there. That power must have preceded nature. Again, these are the concepts and the scenarios which needs further clarification or deeper insight, which deeper insights can be found in the work In the Light of Truth, the Grail Message.
Thank you, Gregory. I've just got a question from a listener, and it's sort of, in a way, you were talking about it already, but I will say it because it's just come. And says, question is, can you enlighten us more about the power that streams from creation, that power which Christ's disciples had experienced, and without their that, I think it means that, without that would be no harvest, that power which we as human beings need to understand in order to use it in the right way as willed by the Almighty. So I'm just going to repeat that question. Repeat this question. So, can you enlighten us more about the power that streams from creation, that power which Christ's disciples had experienced, and that power, without that, there would be no harvest, and that power which we seems to be very long, and that power which we as human beings need to understand in order to use it in the right way as willed by the Almighty.
Thanks for that question. There are many sides to that question, although if they were to calm down and examine bits of what we had already discussed, they would have found the answer. First takeaway is power. The second thing is as willed. When the word will is mentioned, one already see an order as ordered by the Creator, as ordered by the Almighty. One can go further and talk about a law. And in making the connection very carefully, one had also mentioned that there is the law of reciprocal action. That law of reciprocal action is what is referred to as the balance, the law of balance. And this law is activated, maintained by that power which streams, which is ubiquitous, which has always existed. So that power activates nature, activates all that exists in creation. So on the one hand, one finds there's the power, or to put it very, very clearly in a picture that will not cause any confusion, there was the talk of that power which the disciples of Christ at that time experienced. Of course, the disciples of Christ experienced it because they themselves had gone through such tumultuous experiences that they were open. They had prepared themselves and they were open. Open in the sense that within a short period, their master had been brutally torn away from them. And in that scenario, the intuitions that has assailed them opened their hearts. At that point, they were able to perceive of this power in a more conscious way. This power, which is granted to creation at a specific period, was perceived at that time for it is a yearly occurrence. What is being discussed here can be understood best if one examines the work in the light of truth. Everything is explained and more. Like I mentioned, that there is this power. There is also the will. And then there is also the love, which love is connected to so-called substantiality. Of course, many have heard that there are three persons, three personalities in one God: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. On the right-hand side is love, the Son. On the left-hand side is the will, the Holy Spirit. And in the middle, high above the right and the left, is the source, the power itself. These form the triad. These form the concept. To have further clarity, one is invited to examine critically, relentlessly, the work in the light of truth. There, all that the human spirit needs is granted.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Gregory. Yeah, from your explanations, could it be clear to say that the human spirit manifests in creation in three forms? Through its deeds, its thoughts, and words. Is it appropriate to say that based on your concept of your explanations of harvest, that our that the various forms of harvest can take place, at various times of the year. So our words they do have how many just period of gestation? Yeah, that they vary from one period to the next. I think it's good to look at our thoughts and words and actions they actually come to fruition at various times, at various intervals. I don't know how you like to paint that, but the question I now have is that I don't know. Can you give some explanation on that? But the question I now have is that you were talking about certain entities that actually help to bring about the harvest of our thoughts and actions or crops, or so to speak. These entities are celebrated, in various parts of the world, in terms of what you said as the um, New Yam festivals and all that. Do you think these festivals are appropriate? Do you encourage them, or what should happen in their stead? Thank you.
First, may I request that questions could be made simpler.
Yeah.
For questions which are made very complex by so many different parts,
Yes.
one can assure you many are unable to follow.
Yeah,
So, for the sake of simplicity and clarity, if a question is asked which is not much hydra-headed, one can then discuss that, and the takeaway will be much simpler to be reflected on. With that in mind,
yeah.
May I first discuss what you just mentioned? Does one subscribe to these festivals which are celebrated whenever there are harvests?
Yeah,
Is that question correct?
that's one of the questions. And initially, I did ask, these harvest. I mean, the harvest you were talking about. Does it only pertain to the crops? That it also involves our action. Let me say our thoughts and words, and their period of gestation varies from one thought to the next. I don't know if you see it that way as well.
Well, there are now two questions.
Oh, sorry.
The first one, which was, does one subscribe to these celebrations of these harvests?
The
One
entity.
will,
Yeah, go on.
yeah, one will respond to it by a counter question. Whenever something is granted to you and you are grateful, that gratitude which comes out of you, is that itself not a celebration?
Yeah.
Should one then ban such celebration of gratitude, which is given by the receiver based on what it has received? That itself, only this receiver can answer. For whenever you have gratitude, that gratitude must have sprung up from having experienced, having seen the bounty which has been returned to the person that has sown. Do not forget, the possibility was also there that the seeds they have sown might have gone to waste. But since it did not, and they can see the bounty, it's all gratitude. So should the sower ban gratitude, which gratitude it has sense within itself? Like I said, that is left for the sower.
Yeah.
One's opinion is immaterial as to that. For a celebration of harvest is more of an expression of inner gratitude.
Yeah. Thank you, Gregory. You see, most of these festivals, these harvest festivals are celebrated, and we tend to look at them as paganish. Yeah, that they're actually not kind of Christianly, like where we have church bazaars and all that. Do Christians, do they can these harvest festivals, do you not do you wish to encourage Christians to partake in these festivals, and not to see them as paganish as such, that they're actually gratitudes, not necessarily directly to the Almighty Father, but it does, it is a there are festivals that are actually um, carried out to honor the beings that actually helped to process these crops, to man them to fruition, and by extension gratitude to the Almighty Father. What I've just asked is that Christians who call themselves, should they separate themselves from these harvest festivals?
It is surprising to ask if Christians maybe need to separate themselves. For when Christ himself celebrated, even before he passed on, and Christians would like to follow the paths that their master have laid down. For anyone who is open, who strives to follow the paths which the master has laid down, will in gratitude also celebrate harvest, which harvest is only a gratitude for being able to receive in greater bountifulness.
Yeah, thank you.
There was another question you asked, but I've forgotten now because you have jumped to another.
I was sorry. The harvest we're talking about, in terms of the period of I mean, in terms to what man produces in terms of his thoughts and words. These do they have their own harvest as well? And the period of harvests, do we have a collection? Do we have a time to we can actually collect all the crops that are actually produced? Let me say in terms of figuratively, the crops that are produced by our thoughts and words. Do we have a particular year where a harvest is made of these thoughts and actions, these thoughts and words? Do we have a harvest period for them?
There was the discussion on the origin of harvest, which that origin or that basis is the law of reciprocal activity. The law of reciprocal activity conditions returns, which returns are in bounty, and whatever is returned, we call them harvest. This applies to everything that exists in creation, whether it be the intake of food, the planting of crops, the breathing of the human being, the talk which we talk, the thoughts which are on our head. These generally are activities which we have initiated. These activities swing, and of course, having given or having initiated them, they gather similar objects in nature, in the construct which we call creation. One uses the word construct. At the same time, one knows that because we have a construct, these constructs are not just arbitrary. So there are laws which conditions all this, such that once an activity has been initiated, there will be a reciprocal activity. The time of the return vary. A simple example: a farmer goes to the farm and sows the crops. Say planted maize or corn. In 3 or 4 months' time, he's reaping it. Another farmer goes to the farm and plants apples. He doesn't reap these apples in 3 or 4 months' time. It will take some time or some years, and then you have the maturity, and then it starts yielding. Therefore, it varies. It varies depending on the motive. That motive is some form of homogeneity. As with the seed, the species, that is how things are going to develop. So if we have sown with our words, if those words are noble, of course, the returns, which will vary, some could be in moments, some could be in weeks, days, or years. It's immaterial. The returns will definitely come. The forms it will take may also vary. But one thing is clear, return they must. So that is what has been observed, and that is an intrinsic feature in creation. That one has sown and one hasn't seen the returns does not mean it will not come.
You did say that the forms would vary. Are you talking about the species? If I sow maybe love, would the form also change, or am I going to receive love in return? I think do the species remain the same as what I sow, as what I sow, or what is sown?
When one sows maize, can one reap oranges? That would be my counter question.
Okay. So the forms would also remain the same, would it?
What one is saying, deep within the species will give rise to similar species or equivalent species. The form being referred to is the time of the reaping. Say, for instance, one goes to plant maize. In 3 months, so-called, it will reap maize. One goes to plant apple. Would one an apple in 3 months? So the forms one meant is the return, the time of return, so-called, varies. But one thing remains clear. They will return to complete the cycle.
All right. Yeah, Gregory. In terms of our present times, people they're talking about maize, which could be reaped which could be, harvested within three months. But you also do you look at genetically modified crops that take fewer months to mature? What does this one actually annul the period, or does it break that period of harvest? I mean, is there any distortion, to the periods of harvest? Like you would say, well, if you plant maize naturally could, be harvested within, grown and harvested within 3 months. But if I use a modified crop modified maize, I could harvest that one within 1 month or a, a shorter period. Does this annul the law of? Does it change and the law of sowing and reaping? Is it or what? How do you see it as and does it is there any interference to the law of sowing and reaping, or how does it interfere with the law?
Maybe one hasn't reflected deeply enough to understand the law of reciprocal action, or which you also classified the law of sowing and reaping. When one goes to the farm to plant apples, the apple tree may take maybe 1 year to 3 years to mature. And then the seeds come and it starts ripening. The same apple tree produces apples every year. Were you expecting that this apple tree will take every 3 years before it produces its apple?
No.
That is not the case. These are the forms which one is referring to. But many shouldn't just take it lightly. The purpose of this discussion is to initiate many a person into deeper reflection.
Yeah.
When it is said genetically modified, one has to understand, what does that really mean? One has altered the genes. Does it mean the genes have been altered? Instead of producing maize, is now producing a cow? So there is the need for each personality to examine in deep, in all its depths, what is meant by this so-called genetically modified food or crops. For by genetically modified doesn't mean that the species have been violated, but things have only been rearranged slightly such that they may be more resistant to some weaknesses, or because they are now resistant to some weaknesses which could have destroyed them, they now have to germinate a bit faster. It doesn't mean that because they have been genetically modified, you plant them today and they grow yesterday, or they grow today and they reap everything today. It doesn't mean that because they have been genetically modified, you plant an apple and it becomes a mango or it becomes an elephant. Each person needs to work within themselves first to have clarity, to evaluate very carefully what has been placed before him or her. Else the tendency is to assume that all things are possible, which is never the case. I will read a piece from the work In the Light of Truth, where it is written for your guidance. It's the last bit. Therefore, awake means you should not be asleep. For that person who is awake is aware, is conscious, and must be prepared for action. I'll repeat, therefore awake. Genuine faith lies only in conviction, and conviction comes solely through an inflexible weighing and examining. Whenever anything is placed before us, it is our duty and our task and our secret task to weigh inflexibly, to examine inflexibly in order to be convinced that indeed this is what could happen. In a similar vein, here we are discussing basically some of the features of creation. Which
Yeah,
features are supposed to be examined so that we come to conviction?
yeah. Thank you, Gregory. Actually, what I'm trying to actually get you to explain is, this has there been any alteration in the period of harvest? I mean, you do. Look, I do remember that, the native chicken, or native hen, takes about 1 year to mature. But you have some species of or the modified chicken could grow and get mature within 3 months. What is the difference between the both of them in terms of, our dietary intake? And
Sometimes one may ask that each person should take it as a task to investigate for themselves. For what
okay,
is being mentioned here is a quickening, not a violation.
I do, yeah,
So if one examines it carefully, in the hints which have been given, in the sense that which would have slowed down the growth is minimized. If one looks very carefully, and if you compare a person who is able to eat properly the right food, such a person is likely to grow faster than the person who does not have even a balanced diet. Is it that that person who eats 3 times with all the necessary nutrients has been modified genetically? Many a thing which has seeped into our system to cause an illness, if they are minimized, then you will find the human body is able to be healthy and to be able to do many things which in the past it wouldn't have done. Another example, go to some places in Africa, you have malaria, which decimates many people. Now, if a vaccine is found which is able to resist these parasites, which cause so much devastation, does it mean that the human body has been modified genetically? What has happened is to grant the human body the opportunity to grow normally. So when you mentioned the chicken in the rural areas, these chicken have to go from one place to the other searching for food. The other chickens you mentioned don't have to go very far. The food is presented to them. And that is why one says each person must be able to examine objectively. Look at the scenario, look at all the surrounding things, and make up your mind.
Thank you, Gregory, for your answer there. Dear listeners, you're listening to Bless Radio. It's the Tuesday night spiritual discussion program. The aim of the show is to introduce you to the spiritual knowledge in the light of truth, the Grail message by Abdushin. And the topic we're discussing tonight is harvest. And you're welcome to join us with any questions or comments. The number to contact us here in the studio on this UK number is 079 444 31366. You can call, text, or use WhatsApp. And if you're outside of UK, it is 004479 Again, you can call, text, or use WhatsApp. Now, Gregory, I actually got another question from a listener, which is very similar question in any case. So the question is, was there a time when man worked in harmony with nature and the elemental beings of nature who swing in harmony with the will of God, who also help man in his bountiful harvest? So it's again a bit of a long question, and I'm just going to, I think I'll just break it down with a little bit only. So here, so was there a time when man worked in harmony with nature and the elemental beings of nature? I'll say it like that.
Well, the question is well deserved. And was there a time man worked in harmony with nature? Nature itself cannot be excluded from the beings that support and maintain nature. So to work in harmony with nature only means to work in harmony with the radiations which flow through these beings and to be in harmony with these particular radiations. For what these beings in nature do, they sort of are the administrators. It's like you have an estate and you have the administrator of that estate, which ensures that this estate is kept clean, this estate functions the way it is supposed to function. Man is only a guest. Alas, many a time, a very bad guest for that matter. Of course, there were times how intermittently you do have man cooperating with these beings. There are some who are able to perceive them. There are some who are able to see them. And because they're able to perceive them or see them or even hear them, they are able to put questions, the answers to which, when many a man follows objectively, is able to receive results, which results turn out to be very helpful. And in gratitude, they share their joy for the most beautiful joy, or the most beautiful gratitude is pure joy. What else can the human spirit give in return other than by cooperating harmoniously with the forces of nature or the beings of nature who administer nature as a gift? For these beings had already existed before man came in to nature as a guest. These beings had been in charge of not only plants, but also animals, also the stones. These same beings are in charge of the earth, of the sun, of the moon, of the physical universe. Now one can imagine the extent, the gigantic extent which their activities cover. And it is not the same beings, they are different species of beings working in nature some in charge of fire, some in charge of the air, some in charge of the earth. These, in the past, were referred to, or are referred to, as the elementals.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, Gregory. Before you come in, Mena, I just want to say something. You know, it's connected with the question, Mena, you asked earlier, actually. You know,
Yeah.
basically, we want to be in harmony with nature.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
what is happening, let's say, in the world today, is we have a very incredibly good transport system. And so, for example, strawberries are supposed to come, be harvested in the summer. But because
Yes.
obviously we have all the four seasons happening at some point in the world, at different times, so you can import from one country
Yeah.
to the other country,
Exactly.
so in a sense, although I hear you, Gregory, that everything happens within nature because you can't bypass the laws of nature. We've made that very, very clear that
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah.
get well, I can't remember exactly the example. I think you said if you put I'm just going to make something up. If you put maize, you can't get an elephant, or you can't get orange or something else, which is of course even totally different things. But the point is, you can't just make something from grow something and turn it into something totally like which is not
Different. Yeah.
which does not have the elements of what it was made from in the first place, where
First
it comes.
place. Yeah.
So
We'll
that
get
one,
that.
you cannot. It's like common sense, how you can make something when you don't have the elements to make that something. So it has to be.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
must have the consideration. But with the human beings having such, let's say, abilities and
Yes.
capability of being able to transport. I'm going to use the word transport
Yeah.
and where you came in, Mena, when you said you can speed up the process with
Yeah. Exactly.
let's
What
say
is the
I'm going to use
implication
the
of
word
this? You know what I mean?
with chemicals or
Yeah.
whatever,
Exactly.
or genetic modification. So
Yeah.
somehow I want to you know
Yes.
what I want to do here. What I want to know is there is, let's say, like you say, working with nature in harmony. Then there's the human. I don't
Yeah.
want to
Interference. Yeah.
interference. You can put interference or modification, maybe the
Patient. Yeah.
word, which because modification can be good as well. It doesn't have to be, because the word modification doesn't mean automatically that you're doing something wrong, something. How can I say?
No, no.
Not wrong,
If
but
man has is modifying anything, it falls out of nature. It's no longer natural. It becomes artificial. It becomes
right.
man-made.
So
Let's be honest with that.
man-made. So the question
Yeah.
then, okay, let's go on that question first. Let's keep it simple. So if
Yeah.
man modifies, Gregory, something in nature, and would you call it unnatural or something not? When we say unnatural, it sounds very crazy that you've done
And then
something. Yeah, or is that
tell us, or
just
does it have any spiritual implication? Yeah. I mean, let us be clear on it. Does it have any spiritual implication? Man modifying nature, like we don't have,
May I, may
three
I come
habits.
in?
Yes, go on, please.
Here we have man has built a house, has built a dwelling, has collected the soil, has collected wood, has subjected the wood, the soil, and the cement, and all sorts of things to provide a habitation. He or she doesn't live in caves. Is that natural? Is it good spiritually that man has to provide a habitation for himself?
Yeah.
Man was born without clothes,
Yeah.
yet he made clothes for himself so that he
Yeah.
could cover his body.
Yeah.
Has it any spiritual connotation? Is it good? Has he changed nature?
Yeah.
That is only a question which the human spirit must reflect on and draw a conclusion. It means he or she hasn't got an inkling on what it means when it is said man has to be natural. To be natural only means to listen to one's intuitive perception and not to ignore the advice of one's intuition.
Thank you for that. And so that's, I think, the key, what you have just said there. We have to listen to the intuition when we are, whatever we are doing. We're talking about harvest today, but any activity, we need to connect with our intuition. If this, if what we are doing, let's say, I'm going to even use the word experimenting, because most of these things are not, have been developed through experiments. Not somebody had, yes, a brainwave, let me, just change this one this way and change that one that way. They just did a lot of experimenting, and they said, oh, this one effect has an, if we do change this element, it has this effect. If we change that element, it has that effect. And then they say, okay, what do we want to do here? And they're just playing with this. I use the word playing, experimenting, and then realizing, okay, this one does that, and this one does that, and then they decide to go ahead with one, well, maybe many techniques, and then in the end, one is used, or others, particular ones are used to, produce the result they're looking to produce. So, what you're saying, I think, Gregory, you don't want to sort of make a judgment that, oh, this is the right way necessarily, because each one can produce something new, which which were not, which
so
you were not.
might,
Yeah, there will be a benefit basically, which maybe wouldn't happen. But
yeah,
go on,
you
Mena.
might also endorse the cloning of humans as well, because you think it's a modification and it's productive. How do you think about that? What's your view on that?
So
Could you repeat the question? I
The
couldn't get
cloning
it.
the cloning of human beings, because it's going to be productive. You endorse it as a procedure of
Are
advancing
you
the
saying the killing of human beings?
cloning? Yeah, when you clone human
The
beings.
cloning
Yeah.
can you
of
can I
human
just,
beings.
okay, Mena, can I ask you to just reform that question and just say it in a, like a brief
If you're
yeah.
to clone a human being, to make a reproduction of a human being in order to improve productivity, do you think is it good? Is it what you encourage for us to do? Because you're kind of endorsing the modification of nature as a way forward.
Well, in the first instance, I posted a counter question for many to reflect on. I did not say I endorse this or I do not endorse this.
Okay.
What one stressed was each personality must follow their intuitive perception. When it is said cloning, what does one understand by cloning? Not what one thinks one understands. What is cloning? There are many discussions about this and about other things. The same thing you have in the scientific laboratory. Now you are talking about biology. And means cloning is you now have a human body.
Yes.
All right, being produced.
Yes.
Is that human body, is it alive?
Yeah, I could replicate the human personality. Yeah.
Look, this
to be about 3 or 4 human beings, of the same
physiology. This is where fantasy becomes dangerous for many a person. You can sort of replicate the human personality.
Yeah.
That is utterly wrong. You cannot sort of replicate the human personality. For by human personality, the real personality is of spirit. So the spirit cannot be replicated. What you may be referring to is a replication of a cell or a replication of an organ. That is not the replication of a personality. So, with due respect, many still need to go back to the drawing board to understand, what they are discussing. So, when one talks about the replication of a cell, that means you have a cell culture and you culture it in such a way that you can now use it. One should not forget that we had the case of blood transfusion, in which blood is taken from one personality, from one body, and put in another body, which only lasts for a very short time. For the source of the production of the blood basically starts from within the bone or the bone marrow, things of that nature. But you still need to go back to the study of biology and medicine and physiology to get this thing very clearly. So, but that never said the human personality is replicated. Whatever one is reading, one needs to examine it quite thoroughly and ask yourself questions. Never, ever take anything for granted and propagate what one does not understand. That is where the walk in the light of truth is different. And that is why one had read at that passage, which says that, there must be inflexible weighing and examining. Had many weighed very carefully, they will now know that there is not the replication of the human personality, but only the culturization of certain cells or of certain organs. These can be produced, but not the human personality. Like many say, they now say in biology or whatever they call it, zombies are to be produced. All sort of things are, considered. And they say anything is possible. That is never true. And that was why there was the example when you have grains of corn, can you replicate it to produce an elephant? Or replicate it to produce a giraffe? When you have stone, can you conjure the stones to become spirit?
Okay.
Even when Christ was tempted, where it was said, oh, if you are the Son of the Almighty, conjure these stones into bread. Wake up. The species remain the same. You cannot leap from one species to another species and then expect all sorts of things to be happening.
Yeah, Gregory, I get it. I get all that. But it is, it's proven that, entire frogs and mice have been successfully cloned from embryonic cells. You see, this one could, someday become man, being reproduced into, being cloned into similar physical, well, personalities. You understand that?
I'm sorry, this is very wrong. Sorry, you said entire frogs have been produced.
Yes, entire.
May I continue,
frog.
please? May I, please, one step at a time?
Yeah.
Entire frogs being produced from man?
No, no, listen. I get. Let me do it. I said entire frogs and mice have been successfully cloned from embryonic cells.
Can you explain what you mean by embryonic cells?
Well, these are cells that have been, put together and then to form into someone's to fetuses and have turned out to become living organisms. Yeah.
Well, you said cells put together. Cells
Yeah.
from where? From the plants?
Yeah.
From
Yeah, different cells of these organisms could be these
ah,
frogs and mice. Yeah. Frogs and
well, you
mice.
see,
Yeah.
you see, you have to understand carefully what you're talking about. First is to get the facts right.
Yeah.
You didn't say cells are taken from a plant or taken from man, and then you put them together and did all sort of jiggery pokery.
Mm-hmm.
Even in science,
Yeah.
the laws of biochemistry or chemical biology, they are very clear.
Yeah.
There is no jumps from one to another. Any jumps, these cultures have to be very, very, very close. Even then, so before one asks questions which are still not clear with him, one first do some investigation to ensure that there is the inner clarity. For without that, the likelihood is there to perpetuate some wrong opinions. An example is what you have in physics, where they talk of someone can be transported from one point to another, all right, because experimentations have been done and it has been produced. They talk of black holes, white holes, and with so much confusion. But the laws of physics, which laws have only come into existence only a few hundred years ago, which are even based on the outward manifestation of the observations of the laws of nature, makes it very clear how things are, what an element is, how one element is different to another element, and how the elements have the so-called the outer layer and an inner layer. All these things have been made so very clear in physics, also in chemistry, and also in biology, and how in the formation of biological systems, it is the interaction between the outermost layer, the electron layer, that all these things have been made very clear.
Okay.
It is not different. So, can I finish? It is not different with that of the biological system. So please, it's advisable
Yeah.
to to ensure you have inner clarity
I do.
rather than statements which, when subjected to real investigations, do not hold.
Thank
So
you. Uh,
so having produced clones from sheep embryos, they have been able to produce the lamb Dolly. Can you remember? 1996, I remember. Yeah. So in terms of harvest, where man is now going to interfere with nature, what form of harvest are we looking at in perhaps 10 years' time?
Man will only reap what he himself has sown. You
Yeah,
said they produce dolly
yeah,
from where? Did they produce dolly from wood, or did you produce dolly from an elephant?
very
The
cheap
same
and bright.
species.
Yes, yeah, but it wasn't through the normal process of procreation. Yeah, exactly.
Good,
Mm-hmm.
good. You mentioned it wasn't through the normal.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand the various manifestations of nature which
Yeah.
has not yet been examined thoroughly? Take, for instance, here is the case of Christ, who had to heal, who even had to call back Lazarus, which by human standard is supposed to have died. Does that violate the laws of nature? You yourself must ask yourself questions. The trivial laws, which are of chemistry, of biology, these laws are also subjected. They also have to obey the laws of nature. The problem is the lack of understanding of man about the various manifestations of the radiations that stream out. In the past, you have someone has an injury, not well treated, and that injury festers. In the past, you have many a woman who has to be supported at birth, the delivery of a baby. Now, you now find that even the womb is opened and the child brought out. Does that violate the laws of nature?
Yeah.
Now you find, let me finish, please. You have an injury, a broken leg, and this is through the help of certain concussions of medicine. These things is stitched together such that it may return to normal. Does that violate the laws of nature? You have the same case of many a person who has eye problems and goes for treatment. These eye problems would have been some degeneracy over time, and these things are corrected. What one is saying is that you must examine very carefully and come to a conclusion. For what is written out there, if you don't understand it aright, again, one goes back. The first discussion, which is in the Grail message, the Walk in the Light of Truth, it says, free yourself from all darkness. And it goes on. He who makes no effort to grasp the word of the Lord aright burdens himself with guilt. Why do you think such was written at all? It means there must be continuous examination to understand so that you do not burden yourself with so much confusion which is thrown around. But as soon as you come to understand aright, then there will be no guilt because you will now know the right thing to do. Some may come and say, oh, they can do things, they can live without breathing. And then you said, all right, get on with it. Let us see what happens after 2-3 hours. Some will say they can heal. Well, let them go to the hospital and see those who are ill there. Either you know, that means you have the innate ability, or you don't know.
Thank you, Gregory. Um, what I'm basically, Mena, did you want to say something first? Because
Well,
maybe we should let's go to another thing. I mean, what I'm hearing and what I'm realizing basically is that everything is a process, and the process has to work within the natural laws, and even if man does whatever he does, in quotes, modifying, interfering with nature, uh, it you can't break the laws of nature. You know, whatever you produce, result that you produce, whether it's let's say is beneficial. Maybe we should put that word, beneficial, for the world or the human beings and the rest of the world. That can be debatable, definitely, but the what you cannot bypass is the laws. So if man comes up, even we call it cloning, human cloning,
yes, well, by the
but
time we
that
start cloning human beings and then getting
yeah, but
replicas, on the streets,
yeah,
we said there, yeah, it's all well and good.
you know that. So the question is about morality in a way. What you're saying, is it right to do these things? Even if man can do these things, is it right for them, for such man to do that?
Yeah,
And
it would have been asked, yeah, what's the spiritual implication of that?
yes, and I think what Gregory is saying, we need to discover that on our own. Each person must discover by himself, uh, through his intuition, um, whether that is makes sense. Because in a way, and in a way, to give a categoric answer could be without having a proper and full understanding of the ins and out of the process, you could easily make a mistake. So I
I
think
mean,
so make a
Gregory
general to
should,
make a
you know,
general
Gregory should,
statement. Yeah.
yeah,
So
Gregory
that's
should begin to examine that, what is actually the fall of man. If he knows that, if he actually goes into the concept of the fall of man, he will knows that, intellectual interference is wrong.
mm,
Can he? Yeah, would he doubt that? Would he deny that? Gregory, please.
Well, you made a statement, the intellectual interference. In that already gives you that's a partial, because the intellect doesn't know it all, that a partial interference is one-sided. And that one-sidedness cannot be right. Of course, that is the case. And the question is, the cloning, like you yourself mentioned, when you do not have a deeper understanding, when it was mentioned the personality is of the spirit. The spirit cannot be cloned. It means these phrases one had used were wrong because it was partial, it was intellectual. Had one considered the whole picture, which is that of the spiritual, which is the basis of our discussion, then immediately it becomes clear the cloning of personality is not possible. So that should be pushed aside. What is now meant is something else. And that something else can be found in the light of truth, the grail message, where one is referring to the intuitions of men and of thought forms. That's a different category which can be discussed. But like he said, let one step grow out of the other. Otherwise, you bring complexity and tons of confusion, and you cannot sever yourself from all what has been said or published about cells, about the biology, and how this grows from this. And there is tons of confusion. The best one may say at this point is to give counter examples. Mentioning, can you have from a species of wood or of plants, can you have lions coming out? In Harry Potter, of course it is possible. But in the laws of nature or in the imaginations of men, of course it's possible. Even in physical reality, there are boundaries which cannot be crossed. But
Exactly.
one
Absolutely.
hasn't got there. And so it is good first to reflect and know these boundaries in accordance with the laws of nature, whether
Absolutely.
it's a process or not. So once one has attained that clarity, many of these questions will vanish of their own.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Now we only
Yeah, I
have,
think you've nailed it at the end. Yeah,
yes,
I
it's
think you nailed it in the end. Yeah, the boundaries that do not have to be crossed. Absolutely. Let us take it as the crowning uh, point of it, of the discussion.
yes,
Yeah, thank you, Gregory. Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
I hope in the near future we discuss the fall of man.
Yes. Okay, well, I will put it down as a topic now. That will be very good, yes, to do that. Um, Now we've only got 5 minutes left, and I'm just thinking we don't want to open a big topic now.
Well done.
Just maybe
Please
we
don't.
can just look just a general question, Gregory, about the future, where uh,
The
I mean,
future
is
harvest, yeah?
future harvest of for man in terms of, well, just let's say life on Earth, where um, you hear, for example, we hear about climate change quite regularly, where people are saying that temperature is going to go up and it's going to be very dangerous. We just can't continue to exist anymore. You know, let's say. Uh, let's say it would be a diminished existence, because it doesn't mean all the humanity will die out, but
Exactly.
there will be a diminished existence. And
Yeah.
the just, and it's not because, oh, there's so many millions of people to, or billions rather, for human beings trying to be supported. It's just the approach that we are going about things um, is not a
Yes.
sustainable
And
approach.
interfering with nature. Exactly. Go on.
Yes. So my
Sorry.
question is that with the way the man is going,
Mhm.
with the lots of species, animal species dying out, and lots of, let's say, like the Amazon, with lots of plants are being destroyed, tree forest deforestation going on. Um, is there any future chance for man to sort of survive with this?
Survive.
Yeah, survive. Yes, for long term. I'm talking long term, or is that? Yeah, basically, let me say it like that.
The
Without,
returns
Things don't change.
which are triggered will be such that many may have to be eliminated because man, through his activities, has placed certain things or has caused many things to be in place such that the returns are catastrophic. Many, like we said, may have to be eliminated. But, and rightly so, for basically those who initiated this need to come back here to experience them. But at the same time, the possibility is there that you have, they themselves might have realized here or hereafter that wrong which they have done, and through harrowing experiences have changed for the better. The returns will be such that they will come. But because of the change many have gone through, the final effect will not be as severe as had been thought initially. Moreover, man should realize that it is the elementals that are the administrators of nature. And these elementals will only fulfill that which has been instituted from on high. So they will fulfill their duties. It is man that has to change in accordance with the will of the Almighty. Only then will you have that the returning radiation will not be as severe because they would have protected themselves. That is only one part. Here on earth, the earth belongs to the world of matter. The world of matter is not eternal. It comes into being, it matures, all right, there's a time of harvest, and then on the long run, it will undergo disintegration into the primeval elements or the primeval substances. At that time, the human spirit is not expected to be around. It's supposed to have matured and be on its way home to paradise from where it started as an unconscious spirit gem. This time, it's supposed to return home as a conscious spirit gem. So any human spirit that is caught during the process of disintegration of the world of matter will lose its form, whether it has cloned many other bodies or not. For it is the body that is cloned, not the spirit. And it is the spirit that is the one that activates the human body. So there must be clarity in all these things. But all that one has mentioned is only a token. I would enjoin many to go and examine the work in the light of truth. There, many things will be found, and it will throw light and clarity to all.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for that. Yes, dear listeners, we'll be back next week. We've come to the end of our show tonight. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next Tuesday as usual from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. with a new topic. Mena, would you like to say anything to the listeners?
Oh yes, yeah. Thanks for listening, and yeah, we now have a can of more questions to ask and answer. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll get through them. I hope Gregory would get through them in subsequent editions. Thank you.
Yes. And Gregory, anything you'd like to say to the listeners to say goodbye?
We wish them well and the strength to examine the work.
Thank you. Yes, dear listeners, please do, as we urge you to pick up the Grail message. You can get a copy from this website if you like, which is www.grailmessage.com. I'll spell that, www.grail, Grail, message, message.com. And I wish you all a great week. God bless. Brother Sayom is next, so he should be joining us soon. All the best, everyone.